thank you everyone for joining us for the session. So the race for AI dominance. This is something that is obviously highly topical, and I'm very excited to have this panel together to join us. Before we start getting into details about the race for AI dominance, I thought we could first give you guys an overview, a crash course on the current landscape of the big AI models and builders. So if you don't mind, if Peter, if we could start by, if Peter and Gayatri, if you wouldn't mind giving us a quick crash course on who the major players are and what their current key models are. And if we could understand how they are progressing towards AGI.
Yeah, sure, and thank you for having us, and it's been an extraordinary conference, so great. Peter Ackerson, I'll start with a joke only because that's, a traditional speaker's joke, but there's an old saying about AI will eventually take over the world, and eventually the world will become down to one supercomputer, a man who's an engineer, and a dog. And the supercomputer will do all of the work. The man's job is to feed the dog, and the dog's job is to bite the man anytime he gets close to the machine. I think there's a perception in the market broadly defined that AI is going to be both a panacea and also some sort of omnipotent capability. And I don't think that's the case. When you look at where we're coming, and I was sharing this with you earlier, I think it's helpful to think of AI as machine learning at another level. We've got a number of participants. So you've got, OpenAI with ChatGPT, Mistral, Anthropic with Claude, Meta has launched Llama. And I think what's interesting about the technologies is the way the models work in terms of leveraging, everything from supervised training, unsupervised training, reinforcement learning, neural networks, and LLMs. When you look at how these models function, they're all ultimately in some ways converging, I think, in terms of how people are beginning to slice and dice them together. But the ways, and we'll probably talk some about this, the ways the business models are going to be monetized and the scale and scope of the activity is going to be pretty profound, right? So you have those who can monetize off of their existing businesses. So think Microsoft with OpenAI. They sell a suite of Office and enterprise applications. So AI can be monetized through that pretty straightforwardly. Google is in danger, I think, and has invested into DeepMind and some of these other things, because if you've used ChatGPT or Claude, you'll realize that it's much more effective as a provider of information in a lot of ways than Google's traditional search engine, which is 85% plus of their revenue. And Meta is the other interesting one in my mind, because being late to the business and not having an explicit way to monetize AI, they've gone with a much more open architecture that allows more collaboration so they can get talent in and do so in a way that effectively keeps them competitive and in some ways sabotages the potential fee pool that their competitors might make off of their own AI platforms. So I'll pause there, but would love to hear your thoughts if you have any.
Yeah, Gayatri, if you wouldn't mind picking up where Peter left off on the key model builders and their differing approaches, and given that Peter mentioned Google and the threat that Google faces, actually, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of a history lesson, going back to what DeepMind has done and what changed in 2017 with the Transformer paper, which Google published and enabled this arms race for AI that's been going on for 40, 50 years to suddenly materialize and galvanize in such a transformative way.
Yeah, absolutely. First of
No
all,
pun intended.
thank you very much. I know that we have very small number of audiences, so excited to speak to you.
We do have a large audience on TV.
Okay,
so.
great. So we are a growth equity venture fund, and most of the companies that are mentioned, which are private companies, they happen to be our portfolio companies. So, I try to love all of them equally. But we are living in an era of where what has been people working on, like Jeffrey Hinton, he just got a Nobel Prize on AI. He has been working on this for the past 30, 40 years. Large language models have been a long-standing research topic and discussion since 1950s. So this is nothing new. What changed is the transformer-based large language model, which Google published through DeepMind. And so I remember meeting Mustafa, who actually started the DeepMind, and Google bought it. And now he's part of Microsoft. So it's an interesting phenomenon. The reason that they started, they thought that AI is the next big thing and we can create opportunities, which is actually interestingly backed by Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, and a couple of others. And then Google bought that company, and unfortunately, DeepMind went nowhere. Because one of the key factor of the AI race is research and development. We are still in the research and development phase. So every company that you're looking at, they are doing R&D, like major R&D. But at the same time, when you're taking private money, and this is where the VC hat coming in, it's like you have to commercialize some part of your AI models so that you can generate revenue. And that's where we are right now. So Google, which started with DeepMind, the focus was always R&D. I have team members who are former Google DeepMind scientists, and I have invested in people like Cohere, who came from Google DeepMind. Interestingly, Google focused a lot on where the revenue is coming versus where they can have a true R&D phase. And I think people who were making the most at DeepMind out of research and development in AI, they kind of forked. And then all these smaller startups started coming. And I think what Google DeepMind posed as a risk, and the risk was, there was a discussion between Elon Musk and at that time, Google founder, and Elon Musk started OpenAI. And that's how OpenAI was born, purely in the R&D format, nonprofit, focusing on human. And we know where OpenAI stands right now. So there's a big market towards AI, but there are people, so I'll define those categories as open source models, closed source models. So right now what we are seeing over here is a closed source model, which personally I'm not a big fan of, because think about internet being a closed source model, only US military companies or US military being used, we would have lived in such a regressive society. So open source model is, I think every VCs, we are a big fan of that. But looking at a closed source model, then we can divide this into multiple areas. One is that I think the number one is OpenAI. They came up with O1, which is basically a reinforcement learning models. And their benchmark is almost similar to, actually exceeds human level PhD accuracy in basic science like physics, biochemistry, math. Before that, there was Anthropic, which has a Claude model, and that was more like undergraduate level. Now, the big difference between, and I'm going to talk a little bit about more Anthropic and OpenAI, and they are almost look like similar because they have a consumer model. They're also trying to get into enterprise model. But the biggest difference is that OpenAI is much more focused on media, journalism, and other areas, whereas Anthropic is much more focused on very detailing and losing the hallucination, more focusing on how this can be a safe AI. They call it a constitution AI. And the biggest focus of that, the application. So OpenAI's applications are way different, way they're monetizing it. Anthropic application is at healthcare, finance, which are heavily regulated market. So you can see the differences, how things are played out. We as a VC are a big fan of enterprise market, and we invested in Cohere, which is a different kind of a model now, like a sparse data model, where the focus is like data privacy is number one. We don't need large language models, and I'm also not a big believer of large language models. The focus is that with small language models, we can actually give better output. Now, there are so many divisions that are coming up, and I think that the corporates are playing at a different level, which is Meta, Google, Microsoft. When you have too much of money and so much of money needed in order to feed your GPUs, where most of the money is being collected at the NVIDIA stage, we as a VC are trying to figure it out how the future of computing is going to look like, whether it's a large language model or whether it's a visual action language learning. And all of this, just to be very, very frank, we're still at a very baby phase in R&D. And I think that whoever goes towards the AGI, it's almost like discovering new physics. So I can predict more Nobel Prizes coming in this area.
So, Luca, if I could actually shift the discussion a little bit to understand your views around looking at, instead of build the model first and then find a commercial application, finding the commercial application first and then seeing, not being the hammer looking for a nail. Because I understand that that's central to your strategy, looking at earlier stage, looking at companies that are applying AI to commercialized strategies, and starting with the business model first.
Yeah, that's correct. I think some reflections maybe on the previous points made. I mean, I think ChatGPT is an incredible product. I think calling it in the research and development phase is maybe a bit ironic. I think it provides so much value. I think the challenge maybe is if you think of electricity today that we're all using in this room. It's hard to say whether I don't think it's necessarily value-based. It's more like based what the cost structure is. And I think the same is happening to these models. If they were able to charge what you actually be willing to pay for it. I love ChatGPT. I pay $100, $200, $300 a month. But they can't because the competition is kind of increasing. So the pricing is tricky. For us, I think we've kind of missed that market a little bit. But what is interesting, I think, where people can charge completely different prices is in vertical applications. So understanding how lawyers work and build a product specific to their use case is something completely different. You need to understand how they behave, what are the most important things, for example, like don't screw it up, or also integrate it really in their everyday life and solve small problems with like how they interact with the customers and so on. So those types of companies is what we back and are interested in, where we see that companies can charge 100, 150, 200, 300. We're just looking at a co-pilot for public relation professionals or kind of, which is quite interesting. They charge $500 per user per month, and they're super willing to pay for that because they understand the vertical workflow so well. They basically look at it and say, like, I can pay an analyst $6,000 a month, fully loaded, or I can pay this thing $500, right? So as you repackage, I think these incredible capabilities that people are investing billions in and is fascinating and is super powerful, I think there is a whole wave of new applications that are coming where you can just build essentially better software, right? And that's what we're looking at. I think the other job is very difficult. So I have great respect for whoever is investing in the models. I wouldn't be sure where to put my money. Is OpenAI undervalued? Maybe, is there other newcomers coming? Do I still have the? My friend who stays here actually he's investing in a company called Magic Dev. I guess you never heard of it. Magic.dev. They're doing something with a big token window valued at $2.5 billion. I think they have 0 revenues, for example. There's a lot of those as well. Maybe a good investment, maybe not. He has made like 30x on it for now. So let's see. So right now it looks like a good investment. Yeah, but I think there is tons to be done of just kind of, again, understanding how people work and then build products around that. And that's what we do. And we see tons of opportunities. Accounting, we're just investing in a company that solves a co-pilot for accountants. And then all other stuff, that you could do with vision, for example, safety in the workplace. We have a company that monitors through cameras, safety in workplaces and factories. It's not really LLMs per se, but kind of the visual models help a lot to that as well.
So, Peter, would love to hear your perspective on, investing in the space through big models, guys being part of the arms race, and those kind of buying the arms from the big arms dealers, and then fine tuning them or selling them to their end customers. How do you look at the different pockets of potential portfolio companies, and what's your strategy on allocating?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the first thing to realize is there's a lot of ways to make a movie. There's a lot of different ways to think about how you're building an AI business. We tend to invest early stage in companies, which typically means that these are companies from 2 to 10 people. We've made several AI investments, and I've been an investor in the space since 2017. But you have to recognize, and I think Gayatri did a great job, we're at a moment where it is something of a superpower race. There are clearly going to be large global scale platforms with incredible capabilities, and there's a lot of competition to see who's first to the post there. That is going to be a very capital intensive decision. When I look at companies that are being valued in the tens of billions or even hundreds of billions of dollars, as an investor, that's not a place that we put our money. But you have to recognize that in some ways, the decision to invest there is not driven in vacuum by financial returns. It's driven by a perception of we want to own, for lack of a better word, the commanding heights of these technologies. This is the strategic high ground, and we believe that having a position in that is instrumental to the future and potentially existential for our existing businesses, right? So when you look at it through that lens and you go, if the alternative is sitting on the sidelines and just watching our entire business fall away, then no amount of money is a bad amount of money if that's the stakes that you've determined. On the vertical side, and I 100% agree with you, Luca, and we spend a lot of time in vertical applications. AI in its many iterations is going to transform major industry categories at a foundational level, right? One of the first, I think, will be in healthcare, life sciences, and that will take the form of genomics. It's already transforming image recognition, how we think about scans, diagnostics, and the availability. And I think this is one of the interesting things about AI. You have to look at it through the lens of an entire value chain, which is some instrument is allowing you to capture data, right? Whether that's an undersea monitor of some sort or a PET scan or something else. It could be a visual image in space that's capturing imagery. That data is then being transmitted to another place where it can be analyzed by one or more models, and then presumably once that analysis has taken place, and that analysis now can be very fast and incredibly robust in ways that were incomprehensible even 3-4 years ago. You can take whatever conclusion you draw from that data set and you can put it and action it, again, virtually anywhere in the world, from under the water to in outer space to inside your body. You can do that with human action, you can do that with robotic action, you can do that with computer motive. So that's a totally different paradigm for healthcare, that's a totally different paradigm for banking and finance, that's a totally different paradigm for supply chain and manufacturing. And so I think that we are, in that, seen through that lens, in so many spaces, we are at day zero for all practical purposes on how this industry is going to balloon.
Well, Gayatri, it sounded like you had some points to add to that, and I'll invite you to do so. But I actually also wanted to, you talked about, you referred specifically to Cohere. You talked about, whether or not LLMs are the be all and end all, or whether models that are more focused or built on specific training sets or with the end use in mind, rather than applying a big model to a use case, training a model, fine-tuning a model to a use case. Would love to get your perspective on that, and if you could also articulate why, while it is technically possible and has is not only technically possible, but actually is practically possible and is happening to fine tune the big models to specific cases, that it's not necessarily commercially the most viable or optimal option.
Yeah, I mean, this is the discussion that we have internally every day. And our team is a team of Harvard, MIT, PhD scientists, Google DeepMind scientists. We have like chip design engineers who have designed Apple chips. I come from a former PhD physics dropout background. And for us, it is important that, we want to dream big because the future of AI is human, but also understanding that where we are in the infrastructure scale, because we are again reliving the 60s and 70s era of computer power and resources that are coming in effect. What was built in 60s and 70s right now, again, it is rebuilding in the infrastructure space. And what was done in 60s and 70s, we reaped the benefit where software and SaaS layers were placed on top of it. Right now, the reason I'm calling this more of an R&D phase, and I'm glad even at the R&D phase, many of these companies are producing revenues, is that the large language model has its own limitations. And the limitation is that the amount of texts reading, the amount of public data is not available anymore. I mean, we were discussing internally also. You need a huge amount of public data in order to keep feeding the algorithm. That's how the algorithm is. Like, you keep feeding data, and then you expect that it's going to learn and it's going to give a much human-like output. Now, the data that it is getting fed is mostly our interaction. And you need to understand there are a huge amount of hallucinations. Because we human, we are very different. We are not machine. We are not honest in our conversation. Even if you don't like something, you'll not be rude. And you will also be like someone, you will be like, okay, maybe I will play things very differently. So all of this, even if I'm having a conversation with someone, it may not be giving the exact thought process that is coming in my mind, and that's what we are feeding to the machine. So it's a very different dynamics that's being played. So I think many of the people, like I think XAI and others have spoken, that people are going to run out of public data. And so Anthropic is focusing on synthetic models of data, and that will have its own sets of hallucinations. And so it will be interesting to see. I think one of the prediction I can make, and I know you didn't ask for prediction, but the company that has the most amount of data, and I think that as an XAI, because the access to Twitter, Starlink, Tesla data. I also think about Meta because the amount of data Facebook has. So it will be a very interesting scenario that will play out over there. Now, coming back again to the large language models, these models' biggest issue is the algorithm. That's what we were discussing. And then the future, as I said, is human. And what we look at human is that we reason. There are much more cognitive development. Like if you have children at home, you see the development of a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, and the way they started reasoning. They are just like an AGI. They are collecting data, and they're like, okay, this is the way I can reason and figure it out. We are still not there. But I think the OpenAI O1 is still there, because what does OpenAI O1 does is that it does reinforcement learning. So even before responding, it has internal long chain of thoughts. And that's what makes us human. You have this chain of thoughts, and then you produce those chain of thoughts. So we are kind of getting there. But the path, we don't know whether it's a large language models, because the cognitive reasoning, there are a lot of areas that plays an effect. And I think neural network and neuroscientists will play a huge role in this, because the LLM or any other way we are figuring things out, there needs to be evolution of greater algorithms. And I want to bring this discussion to a little bit. I know you didn't ask me about humanoid robots, but humanoid robots is the biggest application of LLM, because a robot is coming to your house, and I think there are a lot of predictions that the robots will be in our house in 2-3 years, which I doubt, because what is happening is that what we are feeding with LLM, the output is like going through visual language action. So that means what? If you have a robot in your house, and I'm giving certain application example, it's like you asked the robot, hey, I'm holding a very hot water. Can you please hold it fast? And if the robot is still processing and you're holding the hot water, you don't want robot to do that. Or suppose you and your spouse are fighting and the robot decided like, okay, I have already folded the laundry, and should I go and interject and give them the laundry? So there are various reasonings that comes in effect, and I think there are more research that needs to be done. And as I said, we are very earlier phases of development, but at the same time, I think we are moving very, very fast because we are living in a world where like the barrier to entry has reduced. We need to find ways where we can reduce the GPU cost. So there are opportunities that will come in effect. And just to answer your question on smaller data models, I think as of now, sparse data models is definitely a great opportunity for enterprise customers to use them, because you cannot use OpenAI for your companies. You don't want all your data to be out there in the market. So you want those sparse data models to be there where you have focused on data privacy and making sure there is less of a hallucination. So that's the immediate sort of product that is out there in the market, which is Cohere is doing. And I think Anthropic started with the large language data model more on an OpenAI format, but now they're focusing on, okay, what's the immediate way we can bring revenue? And they have also started focusing on enterprise. So as we say, as a VC, everything is great, but better give us application fast and better start earning revenue. Then otherwise the VC money is gonna dry out fast, because the patient capital for us is like 10 plus 2. And all this research and development is gonna take years. But my only request over here is that we need to finally see more and more scientists coming into this place. And I think, and I'm glad that the bigger software companies, like we call it, all this Microsoft, Facebook and others coming in effect, because you need so much of money, and I'm glad they are the kind of patient capital that are giving money, because I don't think VCs have enough money there to even put into the place and keep feeding these models.
I'm being signaled that we are pretty much out of time, which is incredible. We went through only a fraction of the questions. We could discuss this for hours, and I would certainly love to be able to do so. But we are under constraints. So Luca, maybe if I could ask you to just take us a little bit through how your portfolio companies, which are focused, more vertically and more on commercial applications, are using the big models that we've referred to. Whether you've seen any preferences or biases towards different architectures, different systems. What your perspective is on when you're looking at a portfolio company. How far back do you look into their tech stack?
Right. So I think one funky company that we have is called, what they work with is a LLM router. So imagine you, in real time in this case, actually choose which model you wanna use. So that's a pretty interesting problem to solve. That is obviously has only emerged in the recent years. So now there's so many models, to your question, that people actually pick and choose them. So that's one interesting company. So they work with all of them, obviously, to your question. Otherwise, I think people go, I wouldn't really have the answer. Probably people start playing around with OpenAI in the beginning, and then they do something open source because it's a bit cheaper and they want to own their model. Yeah, it's not really something we care about. I think what we do care about is a little bit when you build this company, you might not want it. You want to have an understanding that your architecture, the way it's built, that you're somewhat flexible, right? So I guess the fear everybody has, or like if your product was, people call it wrappers, if it's literally just a wrapper and you're completely dependent on OpenAI's APIs, maybe that's not a good thing. But I wouldn't have a perfect answer to the trend. I've seen a statistic also, which I thought was pretty cool. so people keeping track of the model's performance, and they claim that no model has been the top performer for more than 20 days. So there is this constant, I guess the topic of the panel, there's a constant race, and so, yeah, I couldn't give you a clear answer on the pattern, to be honest.
Well, maybe if I could also just ask you one quick question, given that you're also looking at the early stage investments, and Gayatri talked about robotics and that this is the big application. It's something that in addition to my other roles, I'm a partner at Draper Associates, and Tim Draper, agrees with Gayatri on this. But his perspective or his experience in the last 40 years as a venture investor has been that robotics has always been very disappointing as an investment, because you never really got those power law returns. If you picked the most successful robotics companies, they didn't actually do that well. They failed to achieve that kind of level of significant scale and do those power law style venture returns. Do you think that changes now? Do you think bringing AI into robotics is going to be able to create those real robotics companies that are able to knock the lights out and return your entire fund?
Right. I'm actually just doing a little deep dive. I work with a professor who's probably world leading in just the hand. So I guess robotics has different components. So you have the hardware components, and hardware investments are tough, and that's probably where Tim lost a lot of money in the last years. One of the coolest companies you could check out is called Skilled, SKILD.ai. So what they're trying to build is like an open AI for what you call action models, or more like maybe what we could in robotics you would maybe call control. So the control of the machine in the physical space. And so they're trying to build a kind of generalistic model. I think from a software perspective, that's obviously brilliant. I think that's where you should put your money, potentially. With the caveat, as always, maybe you shouldn't put your money. With the caveat, of course, that Tesla is surely going to build their own model, and whoever builds like these big robotic applications is maybe going to own their own model. I don't know, robotics. I think the big wave that is coming at some point, nobody knows when. The closer you are in robotics, the more skeptical you are. Generally, I've observed. But at some point, these generalist robots will become quite useful, and I think then there is a big market for like just people doing some part of blue collar jobs, or like these kind of applications. The home. Having a robot at home that just cleans up 24/7 behind you. It's an appealing thought, and it's a big market, right? So if you can crack that. Otherwise, robotics, to date, right, there haven't been any generalist robots. It's only as a vacuum cleaner, or it's a car manufacturing piece component thing. And then it gets very kind of too niche hardware. So I think that's why people struggle to make returns. I don't know.
Can I just add one thing? There is a company, I will strongly suggest all of you to go and check it out. There is a We Robo Tesla Optimus was dancing on the song, What is Love? And the hand movement was so smooth, it has never been achieved till date. And this was autonomous, not other robots were teleoperated. So we have come a long way, autonomous robot, the way they were dancing. But Figure AI is another company we are looking at. I'm close to the founder. Obviously, these are all Series C, Series D. But that's another great humanoid robots already at BMW manufacturing facility working. Next, they're going to go to, I don't know whether I should say this, but okay. The next option is Amazon. They are going to send there, and they're at generation 3. So they're the only ones which are much ahead. And Boston Dynamics, it's more in R&D phase, which is in a completely different Toyota and Hyundai is building, yeah.
Well, they have some surveillance bots. They're little dogs that run around and keep some track, which I think is quite cool as well.
Yeah.
But I think actually for the humanoids, I think there is a common deception. I think the factory application, I don't believe in as much, because in the factories, everything is so optimized.
Well, I do hope in a couple of years that the cocktail reception at AIM Summit will be serviced by humanoid robots giving you drinks. And I hope even more that those humanoid robots aren't being controlled by bartenders in the next room over. as they were recently in Los Angeles. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us for this panel. I have to give a big thank you to the panelists and to our audience for helping us on this discussion.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you.